Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards.
If you're listening to this podcast, then you're in great company. We've got thousands of listeners who have a thirst for continual improvement and raising standards in business. Whether your interest is in quality, sustainability, or risk standards, I'd love to welcome you as a member to our online platform for all things ISO, the ISology Hub. The ISology Hub is the leading place to get access to all of your online resources, from in-depth training courses through to our very popular coffee break training, to templates and action plans and many other resources to help raise standards. As a member, you get access to over 100 courses, taking you from learner to practitioner to leader. The ISology Hub has all the resources that you need, which will really help to make your life easier and to help improve compliance in those business critical areas. So if you'd like access to learning and compliance resources ranging from data privacy to environmental management, anti-bribery, business continuity, quality, health and safety, to name just but a few, the list is endless actually, then we'd love you to come and join us. Just head over to the isologyhub.com.
Hello everybody, I'm Ian Battersby. I'm your host for the ISO Show and also one of the senior ISology consultants at Blackmores UK. Today I'm going to be talking to you about what I like to call the interconnectedness of clauses within the management system standards. It sounds a bit wordy, but basically it's about the different linkages there are between all the clauses in the different management system standards. I'll jump into this. The high-level structure for the management system standards, which was brought in around about 10 years ago, creates a common framework for management systems. I'll talk to you in general terms about ISO 9001. It's the daddy of all management system standards in a way. But really what I'm saying applies to some extent to all of the management system standards. There is very common language between them. Some have specifics in them that go over and above what's in quality management. Quality management has some more things in over and above the others, but there's very common language and for good reason. Now, on the face of it, 9001 is a bit frustrating because it seems repetitive when you read the detail. But like I've just said, there is very good reason for the way it's written. Looking at the clauses, there are 7 which really meaningful ones in any way for us. They're clauses 4 to 10, context, leadership, planning, that sort of thing. But the reason they're written the way they are is because the standards themselves are based around the cycle, the plan, do, check, act cycle. Many of you probably have heard of this, the PDCA cycle, but that's the basis for the high-level structure of the management system standards. And it's quite a simple process. So plan, so you establish objectives, the resources which you need to deliver results. You identify risks and opportunities. From that point, you implement what was planned. Then you check, so you monitor against the policies, objectives, and any other requirements. Basically monitor against what you said you'd do. And then you act. So if you found anything that needs to change, you make that change and you improve as an organisation. You improve that management system. Because of this cycle, everything in the standard is linked. None of the clauses sit in isolation and they refer back and forth, sometimes quite explicitly. There are actual clauses referenced from within other clauses. Some, it is implied that the language makes you refer to another part of the standard because it naturally flows. But one part of the standard can't exist without the other. I can't explore every link in every clause today, but I'll take you through some examples of how things do connect to each other. First of all, if you look at the clause 4, which is the first meaningful clause for us in, say, 9001 in particular, that's about context. So the clause says, the external and internal issues relevant to your purpose and strategic direction and affect your ability to achieve intended results. Now, that's a bit wordy again, but the scope of your entire management system depends upon this. This is the world in which you operate, the world in which your business runs. It's what you buy, it's the people you employ, it's what you make, it's the people you sell to, it's the laws you must follow. It is all of that sort of thing. They have an impact on how you operate, on what you do. Already I've referenced multiple items within just that sentence, which are covered in subsequent clauses around people and their competence. How you make things, design, change it, deliver it, who you sell to. The customer focus is referenced constantly throughout the standards. The laws you follow, compliance obligations are part of many of the standards and the legal requirements you must comply with. So clause 4 already references most of the rest of the standard, which makes sense because that is the context of what you're trying to deliver. Now, it requires us also, as well as the environment in which we operate, the context of the organisation, it requires us to identify all of our interested parties. Now, I shall return to this because this is important later on. But with careful planning, you can align documentation for clauses with each other. So the documentation you develop for one clause, say in clause 4, may actually become useful later on, for example in clause 6, which I'll come to. Now, clause 4 doesn't tell us how we should work out our context as such, but it provides some very good clues, right? There are some notes to the requirements, and as notes, they are not requirements in themselves, but they give us good pointers as to what we ought to be thinking about. So, note 1, issues can include positive and negative factors. Interesting. Note 2, you must understand the external context by considering issues arising from things like legal, technological, competitive, market, cultural, social, and economic environments. So, they're not saying how to do it, but they've said what you need to think about while you're doing it. And a traditional way of doing this, and the way we adopt as an organisation to help our clients, is a SWOT and PESTLE analysis. If you don't know the SWOT and PESTLE, SWOT is an analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And the PESTLE analysis is an analysis of, let me get this right, political, economic, social, technological, legal and environmental factors. Okay? And these two types of analysis sit well together, they work well together. And what they do is they lead us into something else as well. If we skip to clause 6 from clause 4, which is planning, the first thing we have to do in clause 6 is to identify actions to address risk and opportunities. So, if we've done a SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, we've already got weakness, which to me is a risk. We've already got threat, which to me is a risk. We've already got opportunity. Oh, by the way, that's opportunity. So risks and opportunities are already identified in the context of the organisation. We're already driving into the next part of the standard by doing just the context bit. And as I said earlier, context is important. This is the world in which you operate. And those factors, PESTLE and SWOT, really do help to describe that world in which you operate. So, as I mentioned before, you can see with careful planning that you can align documentation for one clause with that of another. SWOT and PESTLE in clause 4, risk and opportunity in clause 6. So if we skip from clause 6 again, If you've identified what might go wrong, i.e. risk, you need to plan to ensure it doesn't go wrong. So that may involve a single improvement action, okay? Which is linked to clause 10, funnily enough, which is called improvement. It may be that you need something bigger though, involving many more steps, more activities over a period of time. Now I would describe that as an objective, and clause 6.2 is objectives. So now we're driving from clause 6.1 into clause 6.2 because you've established in clause 6.1 big things which need doing, and in 6.2 you're putting in place objectives to address those. So the planning of objectives is linked directly to the context of the organisation. Perfect. This is how the standard is hanging together nicely. This is the world in which you operate, and this is helping leadership bring the way you build a management system into the strategic direction of the organisation. Now, on top of this, you may identify risks that require some sort of operational control to mitigate them. A process, a procedure, that sort of thing, which you could view as a sort of business as usual scenario. Well, clause 7 requires you to document the information you require to run the organisation. So those types of controls need to be documented. And clause 8 is all about operational control, how you apply the controls you've written to the actual scenarios you find yourself in. So the risks we've identified are now leading into not just improvement plans, they're leading into objectives, and they're leading into documented information and operational control. So we're flowing very nicely through the standard. And again, because the operational controls we're talking about here are linked to risks which have come from the SWOT and PESTLE, they're directly linked to the context of your organisation. So you're developing operational control to directly lead to an effective system for the world in which you operate. Now, I've talked about risk throughout here, but the same can be said for opportunity throughout. Opportunity is simply the reverse of risk in a way. It's the scenarios which lead to you being able to take advantage of a situation rather than you reducing what might go wrong in a situation. So opportunities and risks belong in the same register, and you can have measures in place in terms of objectives, improvement plans, and in terms of operational control, which cover both.
Are you new to ISO standards and want to know what it's all about? Or maybe your company has multiple ISO standards, but there's a lack of engagement and compliance. Whether it's quality, sustainability, or risk standards, the Isology Hub is your one-stop shop for all your online learning resources associated with raising your company's standards. From as little as £99 a month, you can have unlimited access to hundreds of online training courses and achieve certification for completion of courses along the way, which will take you from learner to practitioner to leader in no time. So what courses are in the Hub? Well, there are courses on everything a head of quality, sustainability, information security and health and safety would need to manage compliance and raise standards. With over 100 courses available to you, here are examples of just a few. ISO 9001 Internal Auditor, how to transition to the new ISO 27001 standard, the role of ESG in quality management, and how to integrate management systems. But it's not just courses in the Isology Hub. You can access templates, downloads, and action checklists to take your business to the next level. So why not try the Isology Hub today? Just click on the link at www.isologyhub.com and you'll get access to all our resources within minutes. If you're interested in embedding best practice across your organisation or would like to develop an awareness and training programme for employees, we offer a free learning and development session to tailor a bespoke training programme based on your organisation's needs. So we'd love for you to join as an Isology Hub member. Just head over to isologyhub.com to get access to your unlimited training and compliance resources.
If we move through the standard further, clause 7.4 relates to communications. Now, the standard says you shall determine internal and external communications relevant to the management system. For instance, the quality management system in 9001. Well, in clause 4, I've already mentioned that interested parties need to be determined. Interested parties used to be called stakeholders. I think there's a specific need to own a stake in something if you're going to be a stakeholder these days. So interested parties is the language of the management system standards and the high-level structure. So I've mentioned interested parties already. We already need to sort of identify who they are and how they affect us and how we affect them, and what they need and expect from us. These people are customers, employees, shareholders, suppliers, regulators, your neighbours, the media, depending on the sort of organisation you work in. Basically, anybody who affects our outcomes. So we've already identified these people, what interests them. So it's only a small step to add to this the method by which we'll communicate with them. You know, the basis for a communications plan. We know who they are, what they expect. We'll just go one step further. 9001 doesn't ask you for a communications plan, but it's a very good way of conforming to the standard, showing that you meet the requirements to have a communications plan that has all the people that you've already identified who are part of the context of the organisation. And again, what's good in one clause is good in another. Follow it through. Now, clause 7 also mentions monitoring and measuring resources. 7.1.5. This is a very brief clause, but it's central to establishing the means for demonstrating your performance. What it requires is that we have reliable results when monitoring or measuring is used to verify the conformity of products and services to requirements. Another wordy piece, very short but very wordy, i.e. we need to be able to verify that we do what we say we're going to do. So, how do we know? Well, already I've mentioned clause 7.5 requires us to document how we do things, the documented information section. Again, it's very brief in its requirements and it leads you to decide how to meet this requirement, but it's all down to risk. You don't document things that you don't need to document. If your organisation has risky elements to it, the risk can be the risk to people, the risk to things, the risk to your reputation. But those things which are a risk, you create controls for. In 7.5, what you document should relate to the risky things that you do. If there is no risk, consider less documentation. Okay? But then we get to clause 8. It's all about operation. So clause 7.5 says we need to write things down according to risk. Clause 8 is we need to do things. And those things that you do should be according to what you've written down in 7.5. So again, there's a natural flow through all of this. The way you do things is clause 8. Now, clause 8 is very specific in what you have to do in ISO 9001. It talks about understanding what the customer wants. It talks about designing that correctly. It talks about controlling any changes the customer might require. It talks about making things for the customer and making them according to the type of organisation you are. It talks about what to do if things go wrong, to make sure that anything wrong doesn't go out the door. And then it's full of post-delivery activities and those sorts of things. So this is what you measure. 7.1.5 requires you to ensure you can measure. 7.5 requires you to document how you're going to do things. And 8 requires you to do the things the way you've said you're going to do them. So those 3 clauses hang together very well. Now, what you should also consider is that measures of success should be included in those things which are important. So the processes you've put into your documented information, which you're implementing in clause 8, should have some measure of whether they're successful or not. And there we reach Clause 9. Clause 9 is on performance evaluation. If I'm honest, I would put the first part of Clause 9 into Clause 7 because it's about determining what you need to monitor and how you do it and when you do it, those sorts of things. But I'll forgive them that. That's a minor issue. I think that's something I can get over. But again, risk appears here. We've already assessed the risk right at the beginning within the context of the organisation. Now we begin to evaluate whether we've controlled risk. Okay? We decide what to audit based on risk. So risk may be attached to certain things we do, certain policies we have in place, processes we run, procedures we have. So you audit according to which of those are risky. We've already set objectives based on the context of the organisation and on risk. And at this point, you now measure the performance against your objectives to see how well you're doing and whether your quality management or other management system is successful. And we've put in place operational controls in Clause 8, which help to mitigate risk. And now we measure whether those controls work, whether we've actually mitigated risk. And then we get to Clause 10, which is improvement. And it's split into two things, really, improvement. Quite simple, really. If things go wrong, find out why and put them right and make sure it doesn't happen again. Principal element of 9001 and every management system standard. And finding out why is a central part to this. So understanding what it is that went wrong and why it went wrong, so you remove the root cause, not simply addressing the effect. And also, there is a requirement to continually look at your system and improve it based on the evaluations done in Clause 9. So Clause 10 refers directly back to Clause 9 to say that performance evaluation should drive improvement. And from that should lead to learning as an organisation and actual innovation, which is a step on. Innovation is doing different things, not just doing the same things differently. So that's my take on how the different clauses interconnect. I hope I've given you a flavour of why the management system standards are written the way they are and an idea about this cycle which runs throughout them, the PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, and what the links are between the clauses. Each standard will have similar forms of linkages throughout it, and the idea that risk is carried through all the way from beginning to end, and then ultimately the concept of improvement, which is what every standard is essentially about. And beyond 9001, we could possibly, a future episode, look at other standards which have very specific requirements in them with links between them. For example, 14001 on environmental management. There are very strong links between context, risk and opportunity, aspects and impacts, and legal requirements, which we could go into in great depth. So that's everything from me on the interconnectedness of standards. Before I go, I'd just like to take time to remind you to subscribe on your preferred media player so that you can stay up to date with all our latest episodes. And if you have a few minutes to spare, we'd really appreciate a nice, shiny 5-star review, if at all possible. These really do help us to reach a much wider audience. And as always, we're always looking for feedback to help improve our show. So if you have any feedback, please, always welcome on any matter. That's all from me. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch up with you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.